Chapter 6 of Management, an Integrated Approach. Corporate Level Strategy. Chapter Outline, Introduction, Diversification Strategy, History of Diversification, Why Firms Pursue Diversification Strategies, Approaches to Diversification, Related Diversification, Unrelated Diversification, The Diversification Test. Results of Diversification, Vertical Integration, Costs associated with Vertical Integration, Alternatives to Vertical Integration. Learning Objectives. After reading this chapter, you should be able to. Learning Objective 1. Understand that corporate level strategies include decisions regarding diversification and vertical integration. Learning Objective 2. Describe the strategy of and rationale for diversification. Learning Objective 3. Explain the difference between related and unrelated diversification and outline the advantages and disadvantages of each approach. Learning Objective 4. Describe the results that diversification strategies have produced. Learning Objective 5. Define the process of vertical integration and explain the reasons why your firm would choose to pursue this path. Self-reflection. Strategizing for growth. Corporate level strategy entails developing a plan for the management of multiple businesses and decide how to expand the boundaries of the firm. It also involves organizational design and ownership choices so that the firm can maximize its resources across multiple businesses. Please respond true or false to the following statements to assess your ability to understand strategies for growing a corporation throughout the management of multiple businesses. I can explain the difference between business level and corporate level strategies. I understand why firm diversification is a growth strategy. I can explain the difference between related and unrelated diversification. I take the cost of entering a new business into consideration when analyzing growth plans. I am aware of the leadership skills that are needed to pursue an effective corporate level strategy. I recognize that the attractiveness of an industry should be incorporated into the decision-making process when a firm is diversifying. I know how firms create synergy between various businesses. I can explain the rationale for pursuing an international approach to diversification. I understand the rationale for vertical integration. I am familiar with the different forms of vertical integration. If you answered true to most statements, you have a solid grasp of corporate level strategies. Introduction. As we learned in Chapter 4, a firm strategy involves two major components: business level strategy and corporate level strategy. Through business level strategy, a manager determines how the company will compete in a specific industry and position itself among competitors within that industry. However, a large number of firms do not compete in just one industry. Rather, many companies, General Electric, GE, Procter & Gamble, P&G, Kyocera, Tata Group, and Westinghouse, for instance, compete across numerous industries, each with different profit potentials and competitive threats. To be successful in leading multiple businesses, a manager must develop a corporate level strategy. Corporate level strategy is defined as the way a company seeks to create value through the configuration and coordination of multi-market activities. One corporate level strategy includes decisions on how many industries to compete across, whether to vertically integrate, whether to buy or sell companies, and how to share resources across divisions. In essence, these choices can be summarized into three categories: 1. Scope, the markets and businesses that the firm will compete in; 2. Organizational design, the manner in which resources of the firm will be coordinated; and 3. Ownership, the relationship between business units, that is, whether businesses should be acquired, owned, or aligned through other means, partnerships, alliances, or joint ventures. The ultimate goal of developing a corporate level strategy is to build a corporate advantage, which occurs when a firm maximizes its resources to build a competitive advantage across its various business units. In other words, a company derives a corporate advantage when it is able to secure collective benefits from its businesses that would not exist if the businesses were owned independently. In this chapter, we will review the major decisions that a manager must make regarding the firm's corporate level strategy. First, we discuss the reasons why diversification strategies may make sense for certain firms. Second, we discuss different approaches to diversification. Third, we will review the results of diversification. Finally, we discuss whether the firm should vertically integrate. These major strategic and organizational decisions are often called big bets because they fundamentally define the manner in which a firm will compete. Let's look at how Disney has successfully developed and deployed its corporate level strategy. The leadership development journey, working across organizational boundaries and partnering with other organizations, enable managers to formulate and implement corporate level strategies. Once partnerships are formed, effective leaders have the ability to envision the big picture while focusing on common goals. Reflect upon a time when you partnered with another person to achieve a common goal. What was your strategic rationale for partnering with the other person? What were the advantages and disadvantages of partnering with the other person? Did the partnership result in personal growth and pooling of resources? How did the partnership benefit others? What did you learn from the partnering relationship that can be applied to the management of a corporate level strategy? The Walt Disney Company. Over the last half century, the Walt Disney Company has been one of the most recognizable and successful entertainment companies in the world. While the company has experienced its share of ups and downs, it remains a case study in how a firm can achieve competitive advantage and long-term profitability through the successful implementation of corporate level strategies. Walt Disney and his brother Roy formed Walt Disney Studios in 1923 in Hollywood, California. While the business struggled at first, they found success when Walt developed the Mickey Mouse character. In the late 1930s, Walt shifted his business from cartoon shorts to full-length feature films, including the 1937 release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first full-length animation film. During the World War II era, the company struggled financially as the demand for animated films slowed. However, Disney survived this period by producing educational cartoons for the government and by diversifying into other businesses. This initial diversification included the creation of the Walt Disney Music Company to control Disney's music copyrights and recruit top artists. In the beginning of the 1950s, Disney began producing live-action movies such as Treasure Island and Old Yeller. The company also created Buena Vista Distribution to distribute its films and ultimately save 1/3 of each film's gross revenues. In addition, during the 1950s, Disney diversified into TV shows with the production of the TV series Disneyland, which was used to promote the company's new theme park in California. Disney followed up the success of Disneyland with another theme park in Orlando, Florida, called Disney World. The new park was an instant success, grossing $139 million from 11 million visitors in its first year. To generate traffic in the park, Disney opened an in-house travel company to work with travel agencies, airlines, and to accompany. However, following Walt Disney's death in 1966, the company began to languish as the corporate focus shifted from filmmaking to theme park construction. The company was almost lost to corporate raiders in 1984, but was ultimately saved by a cash infusion from a private investor who reinstated Roy Disney to the company's board. At this low point in the company's history, the reins were handed to Michael Eisner. Eisner's first order of business was to breathe new life into the company's TV and movie units. In the early 1980s, Disney had stopped producing network TV shows for fear it would cannibalize its Disney Network offerings on cable. Eisner took the opposite approach, producing several shows on network TV to bolster the company's brand image. Eisner next turned his attention to the ailing movie division, which maintained a paltry 4% share of the box office in 1984. The new management team completely changed both the type and way in which movies were made at Disney. During this period, Disney produced more films, on average 16 per year versus 4 per year, began producing comedies and live-action films for older audiences, NAPTA corporate level strategy to cast lower-priced actors, and held all film budgets to strict financial controls. Of Eisner's first 33 movies, 27 were profitable versus an average hit rate of only 40% for the industry. Over the next 10 years, Disney expanded its corporate reach into new businesses and re-emphasized its core through significant investment. With its launch of Disney Stores in 1987, the firm pioneered the retailer's entertainment concept, generating sales per square foot at twice the average rate for typical retail stores. Disney also expanded the theme park division, building Euro Disney, Typhoon Lagoon, and Disney Mgmt Studios. Through its Buena Vista home video unit, Disney achieved tremendous success by selling videos directly to consumers. Further diversification occurred through Broadway theater productions, the purchase of an NHL hockey team, the Mighty Ducks, and the development of new production studios under the Miramax and Touchstone names for films aimed at adults. While all these initiatives broadened Disney's scope, the company cemented itself as one of the most diversified and vertically integrated firms in 1995 with the acquisition of ABC. This acquisition made Disney the largest entertainment company in the world, with with worldwide distribution outlets for its creative content. Through the $19 billion acquisition, Disney controlled TV stations, cable networks, radio stations, newspapers, and periodicals. Eisner believed that Disney's ability to leverage its brand and create value depended on corporate synergy. For instance, in the year before a movie's release, creators from Disney's animation group would make presentations to the heads of the consumer products, home video, and theme parks units. The participants would then discuss product options and reconvene monthly to update one another. 10 In short, Eisner believed that Disney's structure created value through horizontal, vertical, and geographical synergies that allowed different business units to share resources and transfer skills. See Figure 6.1. Eisner's successor as CEO, Robert Iger, has continued this approach. In 2006, Disney acquired Pixar Studios from Apple for over $7 billion. Through this acquisition, the company gained access to a treasure trove of new characters from Toy Story, Cars, Brave, and other Pixar movies. With this access, Disney has been able to continue its strategic process of leveraging key assets across its theme parks, retail stores, and movie franchises. Disney hopes to do the same with the Star Wars franchise that was acquired for $4 billion from Lucasfilms in 2012. Case in point, Walt Disney. What is Disney's core competency? How did Disney align its core competency into its different businesses? In recent years, what key investments did Disney make to expand its corporate advantage? What future investments do you recommend to strengthen Disney's portfolio of businesses over the next 5 years? Key term: corporate advantage occurs when a firm maximizes its resources to build a competitive advantage across its various business units. Success with diversification can be difficult to achieve. Many scholars believe that firms should leverage their core competencies in one or two defined industries instead of trying to be successful across a broad array of industries. However, success, as evidenced by Disney, can be achieved with corporate strategy by developing organizational processes and sharing best practices among various business units. Diversification strategy. One of the cornerstones of corporate level strategy is the concept of diversification. Through diversification, a firm engages in several different businesses that may or may not be related in an attempt to create more value than if the businesses existed as standalone entities. See Figure 6.2. The ultimate goal of a diversification strategy is for the whole, the combined companies, to be greater than the sum of the parts, the individual business units. Before we get into the details of diversification, let's review a brief history of the subject so that you'll better understand how the practice of this strategy evolved over time. History of diversification. The practice and popularity of diversification strategies in the United States has experienced cycles of boom and bust. In the 1950s, the majority of Fortune 500 companies derived revenues from a single core business. However, this singular focus began to shift during the 1960s as a result of regulatory changes that inadvertently promoted corporate diversification. In an effort to expand their revenue base, many firms attempted to acquire competitors and/or build internal capabilities that were previously provided by suppliers. With the passing of the Seller-Kefauver Act, the Federal Trade Commission (FTC) discouraged both activities. Since firms could not acquire like businesses, they could either try to grow their existing business through a focus on core sales or try to acquire businesses in other industries. In most cases, businesses did both. They focused on growing their core business and sought to expand into new arenas. This expansion into new industries was a major factor in the adoption of diversification strategies by many firms during the 1960s and 1970s. A common approach to this form of diversification was the firm as a portfolio model, where the company functioned as an internal bank for all of its various acquired businesses. The diversity of businesses within the overall firm was seen as a means to mitigate risk since the firm's investments were spread across multiple businesses. Management consultants promoted this structure by comparing it to a diverse stock portfolio. 12 When most individuals and institutions invest in the stock market, they maintain a diverse portfolio of stocks. By having a diverse portfolio, an individual is not overly dependent on the performance of just one or two companies. The diversity helps to balance high-performing and low-performing stocks and lowers overall risk. In a similar way, many firms during this time period sought to maintain a portfolio of businesses to minimize their risk of being overly dependent on the performance of one business. In fact, by 1979, 45% of the Fortune 500 companies had adopted portfolio planning techniques for diversification. 13 The growth share matrix, also called the BCG matrix, which was introduced in the 1970s by the Boston Consulting Group, was a popular and relatively easy way for companies to assess their portfolio of businesses. See Figure 6.3. The matrix classified businesses or product lines along two dimensions: rate of growth and market share. Market share was used as a proxy for a company's competitive advantage within an industry. Businesses or products that were deemed to have a large market share and a high growth rate were classified as stars. The rapid growth associated with stars generally required a significant cash infusion from the company to sustain that rate of growth. The goal of this investment was to allow the star to become the market leader as the growth rate slowed. At the other end of the spectrum, businesses that had low growth potential and low market share were named dogs. Businesses in the dog category were candidates for divestiture. The other two classifications are question marks and cash cows. Businesses that were named question marks were determined to have significant growth potential but low market share. These businesses often needed significant investments to enable them to build market share. If they could build market share, they could have the potential to first become a star, and then, as the growth rate had slowed, they could evolve into a cash cow. Alternatively, they could become dogs if they were unable to secure sufficient market share when the growth rate declined. Cash cows were mature businesses that had significant market share and relatively low growth potential. Since these businesses had low growth potential and high market share, they did not need significant cash infusions from the corporate entity. Instead, the profits generated by cash cows could be milked for reinvestment in stars or question marks. Key term: diversification, a strategy in which a firm engages in several different businesses that may or may not be related in an attempt to create more value than if the businesses existed as standalone entities. The growth share matrix was used extensively in the 1970s and 1980s to enable corporate leaders to quickly assess their portfolio of businesses and determine a course of action. The prevailing wisdom of the time encouraged corporate leaders to sustain cash cows, divest dogs, invest in question marks to make them stars, and increase market share of stars to enable them to become cash cows. 15 While the matrix is still used today, it is often only one piece of a much larger portfolio evaluation process, and like the SWOT analysis that we discussed in Chapter 5, it represents a depiction of the company at one point in time. The increased complexity in the global landscape and the rapid pace of change has forced corporate leaders to evaluate their business portfolios on a number of dimensions beyond market share and growth, including 1. The value that is created across businesses. 2. The ability of the business to quickly adapt and change to new market conditions. And 3. The ability of the business to innovate. 16 The regulatory environment began to change during Ronald Reagan's presidency in the early 1980s. The FTC began to evaluate mergers based on factors that were different from those of previous decades, making it easier for firms to expand by acquiring similar businesses, essentially reversing the impact of the Seller-Kefauver Act. Firms were now able to expand by buying businesses that were similar and, as such, a firm's portfolio could include both similar and dissimilar businesses. At the same time as legal barriers to takeovers fell and easy financing became available, investment firms pursuing hostile takeovers emerged. These investment firms, also known as corporate raiders, at the time, sought to purchase a firm with various divisions and break it up into its components to sell to other buyers, leaving the core business to function as a stand-alone entity. 17 They believed that by breaking apart the firm, they could generate more value. In essence, they were convinced that the value of the parts, the individual business units, were greater than the sum of the whole. During the late 1980s, the diversification trend among firms largely reversed itself as managers lost faith in the portfolio model and corporate raiders divided up companies. Some firms began to preemptively divest divisions during this period to focus on their core business. Others divested poor-performing companies and reorganized around a smaller group of more focused units. Though the level of diversification among firms has ebbed and flowed over the years, it is still a very important part of many companies' strategies. Why firms pursue diversification strategies? Managers seek to diversify their organizations for several reasons. 1. The opportunity to leverage core assets or skills between different businesses. 2. The opportunity opportunity for growth. 3. The potential to manage or minimize risk. 4. The opportunity to expand internationally. And 5. The potential for personal gain. By combining either related or unrelated businesses, managers believe they can create synergy. Synergy is created when a firm generates sustainable cost savings by combining duplicate activities or deploying underutilized assets across multiple businesses. 18. Expected synergies are generally the primary reason firms acquire businesses in the same industry. By combining entities, a firm seeks to capture a benefit that could not be achieved if the entities were independent. As we noted earlier, many managers have pursued diversification strategies in the interest of corporate expansion, especially as the business matures and opportunities for internal organic growth diminishes. One, for instance, Google's entry into the mobile phone industry is an effort to expand beyond its maturing internet search capabilities. In many cases, growth through diversification is pursued as an alternative means to profitability, especially in response to changes in internal and external environmental factors. 20. Another main argument for diversification strategies is the reduction of risk. 21. This argument is based on portfolio management and states that by holding several different businesses, a manager will be able to spread the risks of one business across an entire spectrum of businesses. In this situation, it is argued that diversified business units will smoothen overall firm performance when one or a few units perform poorly. 22. Firms may seek to diversify internationally to find new markets for their products and services. For many mature products, growth opportunities are often constrained in a firm's domestic market. As such, these companies sometimes seek growth in international locations. Firms also diversify internationally to achieve economies of scale. As we discussed in Chapter 5, a firm may achieve economies of scale when it produces a larger volume of products. In this case, a firm can spread the fixed costs associated with producing a product over a larger number of units, which ultimately increases the firm's profits. Additionally, many firms diversify internationally to take advantage of local factors. These factors may include lower cost sources of labor and access to natural resources. A final reason for diversification is based on the self-interests and preferences of senior managers. Senior level compensation is often tied to the size and complexity of a firm. Growth through diversification is one strategy that some managers use to attempt to minimize risk while simultaneously building their domain of control. This incentive-based justification for diversification has often resulted in suboptimal performance unless managers focus as much attention on integration as they do on acquisition. 23. We will discuss issues of implementation in results of diversification later in this chapter, but first, let's explore various approaches to diversification. Approaches to diversification. There are three main approaches that companies utilize as they enact their corporate strategies. Some firms pursue a single product strategy while others focus on either related diversification or unrelated diversification. See Figure 6.4. A single product strategy focuses on one specific product, typically in one market, develops greater core competency, but suffers from more cyclicality. Related diversification utilizes a similar set of tangible and intangible resources for multiple businesses, takes advantage of resources to achieve economies of scope. Unrelated diversification involves managing several businesses with no connection, creates value through financial economies, distributing capital over many business units. A single product strategy is fairly self-explanatory. In this strategy, a firm focuses on one specific product, typically in one market. Through this strategy, a firm attempts to develop core competencies in a specific market, using its resources and capabilities. While focusing on a single product often allows a firm to develop superior core competencies, it can also expose the firm to greater vulnerability if demand for the product or service wanes. Firms that pursue related and unrelated diversification strategies often avoid the vulnerability that comes with a single product focus. Most large companies diversify their operations in some manner to avoid the risks inherent in offering a single product. In fact, in 2005, the average US-based Fortune 500 company operated in 4 distinct industries, with some operating in more than 10. Related diversification. Firms that have excess capacity or potential in their physical assets, for example, production capability, or their intangible assets, for example, strong brand name or research and development capabilities, tend to pursue related diversification. This approach enables a firm to leverage its assets across related industries. Through related diversification strategies, managers attempt to achieve economies of scope, which exist when the costs of operating 2 or more businesses or producing 2 or more products with the same corporate structure are less than the costs of operating the businesses independently or producing each product separately. Economies of scope that emerge from the sharing of resources and capabilities often become a way to achieve competitive advantage. A prime example of a company that has successfully transferred skills across different business units to generate a competitive advantage is 3M. 3M is a diversified technology company that sells into very different markets, including the healthcare and highway safety industries. Over the years, 3M has developed a stable of world-famous products that have grown out of the company's technology and research capabilities. These products include Post-it super sticky notes, Scotch transparent duct tape, optical films for LCD televisions, and a family of Scotch Brite cleaning products. Through its sharing of knowledge, 3M's research community has created a robust development program. In fact, 3M's company norm is while products belong to the businesses, technology belongs to the company. This culture was instilled during the early days at 3M and has persisted over the years to help the company create a sustainable competitive advantage in the marketplace. With 50,000 products and counting, 3M CEO in 2013 commented that research and development is the heartbeat of this company, and it's a competitive advantage. The challenge for a manager is finding these types of linkages to drive that competitive advantage. In most related diversification strategies, managers attempt to create value through the sharing and transferring of resources and skills among units, including the following: sharing sales forces, advertising expenses, and distribution channels for similar products, exploiting closely related technologies or research and development activities like 3M transferring operational knowledge or processes, leveraging a firm's strong brand name and reputation across multiple product lines. 30. P&G has pursued a related diversification strategy over the years by buying consumer products companies such as Gillette. While P&G has developed many well-known consumer brands in-house, for example, Tide laundry detergent, the firm also relies on the acquisition of other consumer products companies to bring value to its many customers. P&G believes that it can create greater value through this related diversification because of the significant marketing and branding capabilities it has developed over the years. Company managers at P&G have successfully transferred these core competencies across new acquisitions for the past half-century. Since 1979, P&G has acquired more than 120 companies from multiple industries in several countries. See Table 6.1. The pursuit of economies of scope can occur through the leveraging of tangible resources, administrative and support functions, internal practices, and intangible resources. In the case of tangible resources, firms often spread many fixed costs across several business units. When a firm acquires a new unit, the core of the firm may be able to eliminate duplicated functions such as distribution and sales, resulting in cost savings for the combined entity. The new firm can share the existing sales and distribution infrastructure among the different business units. This is a strategy that many consumer goods companies, P&G, for example, have followed. When P&G acquired the Gillette company in 2005, P&G's managers surmised that the firm could achieve economies of scope through the combination of several internal functions, for example, distribution. These same managers posited that buyers such as Walmart would be comfortable buying diverse products such as laundry detergent and shaving cream from the same company. P&G also believed that its distribution network could effectively and cost-efficiently distribute both sets of products to buyers. Firms can also achieve economies of scope by sharing administrative or support functions, for example, human resource management and research and development across a broader array of business units. By adding another business unit, a firm may be able to increase revenues while maintaining the same level of costs because it can share these resources among units. In addition to sharing resources, firms can generate synergies by sharing internal practices and processes. When Kyocera, a large fine ceramics and integrated technology producer, acquires firms, it introduces its unique financial reporting and operating philosophy to the acquired companies. Kyocera has developed a tightly integrated business reporting process that enables it to understand the profitability of various departments and work groups in an overall business. This level of detail helps the firm better understand what products and services are most profitable, which enables the company to make quick changes. This reporting capability has become one of Kyocera's core competencies in its internal value chain. Finally, firms can achieve economies of scope through the sharing of intangible resources. When a parent firm acquires other related businesses, the parent can lend many intangible factors to the acquired firm, such as its brand name or reputation. Through this activity, the parent transfers a major source of internal value to the new unit. This unit can, in turn, take advantage of the parent's brand name to achieve greater awareness in the market. Beyond economies of scope, some firms may also pursue related diversification strategies to gain market power. Firms pursuing related diversification to increase market power are attempting to increase the price at which they sell their products to levels above the normal prices found in the market. To gain market power, some firms use their size to push a competitor out of the market. An example of a firm that used its market power to push other firms out of an industry is Microsoft. In the mid-1990s, Netscape, the creator of the Internet Browser Navigator, went public and had one of the most successful initial public offerings of the decade. As a first mover, Netscape quickly gained a leading share of the newly formed Internet browser software business. In response to this success, Microsoft began offering an Internet browser of its own, Internet Explorer, as a bundled product with its Windows operating system. Through this product bundling strategy, Microsoft essentially gave away its Internet browser software for free. Although Microsoft did not explicitly state it, the company's ultimate goal was to drive Netscape out of the browser business. Microsoft's market power originated from its dominant position in operating system software. 31 With this market power in operating systems, Microsoft ensured that Netscape's early lead in browser software would evaporate. Microsoft's aggressive practices of trying to secure market dominance in many product areas led to a series of lawsuits from smaller competitors as well as an antitrust suit from the federal government. Though Microsoft was able to withstand most of these lawsuits, the company's expansion plans were vigilantly scrutinized for a number of years. Unrelated diversification. A firm that pursues an unrelated diversification strategy maintains several businesses that are not related in any way. A prime example is Vivendi. Vivendi traces its roots back to the mid-19th century. The original company, known as Compagnie Générale des Eaux, operated as a water utility in France. During the 20th century, the company used the cash flows from its core utility business to diversify into a range of industries including real estate, healthcare, and telecommunications. While the strategy worked well for years, the company encountered financial difficulties in the 1990s. The company focused on restructuring and divesting certain units and reducing the overall corporate debt that it had assumed to fund its diversification. By the beginning of the new millennium, Vivendi embarked on an aggressive diversification strategy, buying companies in industries such as music content and publishing Universal Music and video game development Activision Games, and selling off its core water utility business. While the firm has successfully restructured itself several times in the last 2 decades, it has struggled to achieve consistently strong performance. Recently, Vivendi has decided to shed almost all of its non-media related businesses as the company seeks to be a more focused and smaller media company. The ultimate goal of an unrelated diversification strategy is usually to create some form of financial economies. Financial economies involve cost savings that a firm achieves through the distribution of capital among business units. In general, a firm can achieve financial economies in one of 2 ways. 1, by efficiently allocating capital among units, and 2, by purchasing a new business and restructuring its assets with the goal of selling it back into the marketplace at a higher price. The downside of unrelated diversification is that it can open a firm to higher levels of risk and uncertainty. Trying to extract the financial value from unrelated diversification is often quite complex and requires significant managerial expertise, especially since the business entities are so different. The underlying rationale for unrelated diversification is that the efficient distribution of capital between business units will reduce the overall risk of the business. As we discussed earlier, the reduction of risk through unrelated diversification is difficult to achieve. However, in a few situations, unrelated diversification strategies can achieve financial economies. One advantage of using unrelated diversification is that it can allow a sick or dying company to use capital generated in a profitable division to prop it up for a short period of time. Without these internally generated funds, the company may be forced to enter bankruptcy prematurely. Unrelated diversification strategies can also achieve financial economies through restructuring. Under this scenario, managers often acquire poorly performing businesses and try to restructure or streamline them to achieve greater profitability. Restructuring could include firing employees, shutting down certain product or service lines, or selling specific assets. To extract value in a meaningful way, managers must accurately assess the core strengths and weaknesses of the businesses that are being restructured. The diversification test. Diversification can both add and destroy value at the corporate level. So when should a manager pursue a diversification strategy? The decision about whether to pursue related or unrelated diversification is often not an either or choice. Many companies pursue both paths simultaneously. In all cases, a manager should seek to identify conditions under which diversification related or unrelated will create shareholder value. These conditions can be described in a 3-pronged test. See figure 6.5. How attractive is the industry? In the long run, the rate of return available from competing in an industry is a function of its underlying structure. As we discussed in the previous chapter, attractive industries have certain structural components that allow them to earn greater profitability compared to other industries. Attractive industries are often marked by high barriers to entry, lack of substitutes, low intensity of competition, and low supplier and buyer power. However, because these industries often have high entry barriers, many firms find it difficult to diversify into the most attractive industries. 33 A prime example of a company diversifying into a structurally unattractive industry occurred when Time Warner purchased AOL in 2001 for $106 billion. 34 This transaction provided the old media giant Time Warner with greater diversification and more control over the delivery of its content. However, at the time of acquisition, the internet provider industry had started to become structurally unattractive for several reasons. While AOL dominated the early internet service business, cable and telephone companies entered the industry in the late 1990s with significant distribution and technological advantages. As consumers shifted from dial-up to high-speed digital subscriber line (DSL) and cable service, AOL's market share began to decline rapidly. When Time Warner acquired AOL, the industry was already threatened by intense rivalry among well-capitalized firms. What is the cost of entry? Many managers also fall into the trap of diversifying into unattractive industries because the cost of entry is low. The cost of entering an industry cannot exceed the benefits that management expects to derive from competing in the industry. Many acquisitions fail the cost of entry test because management teams do not accurately assess either the cost of getting in or the benefits that are likely to accrue to the company from being in the industry. While low-cost acquisition opportunities do exist in the market, their presence typically involves industries with low entry barriers that managers should avoid altogether. Conversely, high entry costs in diversification strategies can be just as harmful for corporate value because the higher initial price impacts the potential for an effective return on investment. Typically, many forces converge to prevent a firm from buying into a new industry on the cheap. Private equity firms, investment banks, and other investors work tirelessly to find undervalued assets in the market. The result of this process is that undervalued companies are more difficult to find because the sale process often attracts multiple bidders, driving up the price of the target. Will the business be better off? According to Michael Porter, when a firm undertakes an acquisition, the new unit or new ownership of the business unit must gain a competitive advantage from its link with the corporation or vice versa. 35 He asks whether the presence of the corporation improves the total competitive advantage of business units above and beyond what they could achieve on their own. A negative answer suggests the corporation should either avoid entering the market or should exit the market. If the answer is affirmative, managers should ask an additional question, namely, does ownership of the business unit produce a greater competitive advantage than an alternative arrangement would produce? In other words, if the two businesses cannot add value above the value they create on their own as independently owned operations, the firm should not diversify. A positive answer to the better off test and a negative answer to the ownership test implies managers should enter the industry, but through some alternative arrangement to full ownership, such as a strategic alliance. 36 As you can see from this set of tests, tests, the decision to diversify into other businesses should be made after rigorous analysis. These strict guidelines ensure that a manager will only add businesses to the firm when there is the possibility of creating real value to the overall enterprise. Results of diversification. The evidence that diversification strategies are better than more focused strategies is mixed. According to one key study, a firm's performance increases as it shifts from single business strategies to related diversification, but performance decreases as firms change from related diversification to unrelated diversification. 38 This research shows that firms' performance often resembles an inverted U, with performance increasing up to a point of optimal related diversification, and then decreasing as the firms diversify too far into unrelated industry. See Figure 6.6. Firms that have been successful with related or unrelated diversification have spent a considerable amount of time on implementation strategies and processes. Managers are key players in the success or failure of diversification. The extent to which these managers work together to ensure the successful implementation of shared resources or leverage assets often separates the winners from the losers. Unfortunately, many firms spend too much time on the potential benefits of synergy, but not enough time on the hard work necessary to make that potential a reality. 39 While the results of unrelated diversification are mixed in the United States, there is ample evidence that this strategy works well in emerging economies such as India, China, South Korea, and Chile. Large family business groups with many unrelated companies or highly diversified conglomerate groups have been successful in emerging economies for a number of years. These economies are often characterized by limited financial markets, political instability, restrictive flows of information, and variable human resource skills. In these environments, diversified business groups often mitigate many of these challenges by generating their own internal markets for funds and resources. Select family-owned firms have preferential access to financial resources and talent. Family-owned firms leverage these advantages by investing in a series of unrelated businesses. In spite of the complexity of running unrelated businesses, they gain advantage by providing preferential access to resources for their businesses. 40 A strong overall corporate brand, such as Tata, can also play an important role in the success of unrelated diversification. Tata Group, an Indian business founded in 1868, used an unrelated diversification strategy to become the largest and most successful company in India. Using strong ethics and values to lead the company, the Tata Group owns 95 companies, for example steel, tea, and hospitality, that compete in 7 business sectors. In 2014, Tata recorded $103 billion in revenue, with $69 billion coming from international sources. The manner in which corporate headquarters interact with the separate businesses in a diversified firm is another key factor in generating sustainable results. Successful diversified organizations can balance centralized control levers, for example, centralized purchasing and information technology, that provide leverage and cost savings throughout the firm with decentralized autonomy that allows business units that are closer to the customer to define real-time operational and market strategies. This balance is especially important in firms pursuing unrelated diversification, where the corporate office generally has limited understanding of each operational business. Vertical integration. Firms that are successful with their corporate strategies know when it is right to diversify and what form of diversification to pursue, related or unrelated. In many ways, related and unrelated diversification are examples of a horizontal expansion plan. Another key lever in many corporate strategies revolves around vertical expansion. A vertical expansion strategy is often pursued in an effort to more effectively share resources and manage costs up and down the firm's value chain. One avenue that some firms pursue to manage costs is vertical integration. In general, vertical integration occurs when one corporation owns business units that make inputs for other business units in the same corporation. There are essentially two different types of vertical integration: backward integration and forward integration. See Figure 6.7. Backward integration occurs when a firm owns or controls the inputs it uses. Forward integration occurs when a firm owns or controls the customers or distribution channels for its main products. Let's take a closer look at examples of each type. An example of backward integration is the Hershey Company's strategy in the early 20th century. The familiar candy company backward integrated into sugar production following World War I to guarantee its own supply of sugar. However, the company bought so much sugar capacity in Cuba that it essentially became a sugar exporter to other companies. Hershey's lack of knowledge of the sugar market and a collapse in the price of the commodity almost led to the company's demise in the 1920s. More recently, many large oil companies have also pursued a backward integration strategy by purchasing oil site exploration services. An example of forward integration can be seen in the example of Walt Disney's acquisition of the ABC television network. Through this move, Disney acquired one of its former customers to control a distribution channel for its content. Other examples of successful forward integration include car manufacturers, who own dealer networks, and Apple Computer's entry into the retailing sector. Through the introduction of its own retail stores, Apple Computer has been able to better manage its relationship with customers. With this strategy, the company does not need to rely on less savvy retail clerks at large electronic stores. It can rely on its own knowledgeable employees. Costs associated with vertical integration. To understand why a firm should vertically integrate, we must understand the total cost of conducting a set of activities. When a firm looks to forward or backward integrate into something, it must not only consider how its ownership of those activities will affect the production costs, but also the costs of overseeing those activities. Similarly, if a firm chooses not to enter those activities and contract for them from a partner, it has to consider not only the production costs incurred by its partner, but also additional costs it must incur to oversee that relationship. In this context, we must consider the difference between transaction and administrative costs. Administrative costs refer to the costs a firm incurs to coordinate activities between its business units.